Hello, everyone. My name is Alex, and for years, I thought I had it all. A beautiful home, a fulfilling career, and a partner, Jamie, who is not just my spouse, but my best friend, my confidant, my everything. Our life together was a tapestry woven with shared dreams, laughter, and an unspoken understanding that transcended words. We met in college, two ambitious souls navigating the complexities of early adulthood, and from the moment our eyes met across a crowded lecture hall, I knew. It wasn't just a feeling, it was a certainty, a quiet hum in my soul that whispered, "This is it. This is forever." Our wedding day was a blur of joy, a kaleidoscope of white lace, beaming smiles, and the promise of a future stretching endlessly before us. I remember standing at the altar, looking into Jamie's eyes, and feeling an overwhelming sense of peace. This was my person. My safe harbor. My forever. We built our life brick by brick, dream by dream. We bought our first small apartment, painted the walls together, argued playfully over furniture, and filled it with the echoes of our shared happiness. We celebrated promotions, mourned losses, and navigated the inevitable bumps in the road with a united front. We were a team, an unbreakable unit, or so I believed. I often find myself drifting back to those early days, the ones that laid the foundation of what I believed was an unshakable bond. I remember our first date, a clumsy, endearing affair at a local diner where we talked for hours, oblivious to the world around us. Jamie's quick wit and infectious laugh captivated me instantly. We discovered a shared love for obscure indie films, late-night walks under the city lights, and a mutual appreciation for perfectly brewed coffee. It wasn't grand gestures that defined our love, but the quiet, consistent moments. Jamie leaving me a handwritten note on my pillow before work, our Sunday morning ritual of reading the newspaper together with steaming mugs of tea, the way Jamie would instinctively reach for my hand during a scary movie. These were the threads that wove our lives together, creating a sense of security and belonging that I cherished above all else. We talked about everything, our fears, our ambitions, our pasts. I laid bare my vulnerabilities, and Jamie met them with understanding and acceptance. I felt seen, truly seen, for the first time in my life. We navigated family dramas, career setbacks, and personal insecurities, always emerging stronger, always with the unwavering belief that we had each other. Our friends often commented on our seemingly effortless connection, the way we finished each other's sentences, the comfortable silence we shared. We were the couple everyone looked up to, the epitome of a successful, loving partnership. And I reveled in that. I was proud of what we had built, proud of the love we shared, and utterly convinced that nothing could ever shatter it. Looking back, the cracks were there, subtle at first, almost imperceptible. Like hairline fractures in a seemingly solid wall. I dismissed them, rationalized them, attributed them to the stresses of everyday life. Jamie started working longer hours, or so I was told. Big project at work, Alex, you know how it is. And I did. I understood the demands of a demanding career. But the late nights became more frequent, the explanations more vague. Jamie's phone, once a shared device, became a closely guarded secret. It was always face down, always within reach, and a quick, almost imperceptible flick of the thumb would lock it if I happened to glance in its direction. I told myself I was being paranoid. Trust was the bedrock of our relationship, wasn't it? I wouldn't betray that trust by snooping. I wouldn't become that person. But the unease lingered, a persistent hum beneath the surface of my consciousness. Jamie, once so eager to share every detail of their day, became withdrawn, distant. Our conversations, once flowing and effortless, became stilted, punctuated by long silences. The spark, the easy camaraderie, seemed to dim. I tried to reignite it, to plan special dates, to initiate intimate moments, but I was often met with a polite but firm rejection, or a distracted presence. "I'm just tired, Alex. Long day." The excuses piled up, forming a wall between us, a wall I desperately wanted to tear down but didn't know how. I felt like I was losing Jamie, piece by agonizing piece, and I couldn't pinpoint why. The fear, cold and insidious, began to creep into my heart. Then came the scent. It was faint at first, a whisper of something unfamiliar on Jamie's clothes. A floral note, delicate and sweet, completely unlike Jamie's usual cologne or my own perfume. I brushed it off, attributing it to a colleague, a new air freshener in the office, anything but the truth that was screaming in the back of my mind. But the scent reappeared, stronger this time, clinging to a shirt Jamie had worn the previous day. It was undeniable. It was foreign. And it ignited a cold dread in the pit of my stomach. I started paying closer attention, scrutinizing every detail. The way Jamie would quickly end phone calls when I entered the room. The sudden need to run errands late at night. The vague answers to simple questions about their day. My mind, once filled with loving thoughts of Jamie, became a battlefield of suspicion and self-doubt. Was I imagining things? Was I becoming the jealous, insecure partner I swore I'd never be? The internal struggle was exhausting, draining my energy and stealing my peace. I felt like I was walking on eggshells, constantly searching for clues, constantly bracing myself for the inevitable. The phone became my tormentor. Jamie's phone. It was always with them, always guarded. I'd catch glimpses of it, a quick flash of a notification, a hurried swipe to clear the screen. The casual intimacy we once shared, where either of us could pick up the other's phone without a second thought, was gone. Now it was a fortress, a digital barrier between us. I found myself obsessively checking the last seen status on messaging apps, noting the late-night activity, the times Jamie was online when I was asleep beside them. Each new observation was a fresh stab of pain, confirming my worst fears. I tried to talk about it, to express my growing unease. "Jamie, you seem so distant lately. Is everything okay?" I'd ask, my voice laced with a desperate hope for reassurance. But the answers were always the same, vague, dismissive, sometimes even tinged with irritation. "I'm just stressed, Alex. Work is crazy." Or, "You're overthinking things." "I'm fine." The gaslighting was subtle, insidious, making me question my own sanity. Was I truly imagining all of this? Was I creating problems where none existed? The self-doubt was a heavy cloak, suffocating me. One evening, Jamie left their phone on the counter while they went to grab something from the car. It vibrated. A notification. My heart pounded in my chest. It was a message from an unfamiliar number. My hand trembled as I reached for it, my conscience warring with my desperate need for answers. I picked it up. The screen lit up, and for a fleeting second, I saw it. A message. Not fully displayed, but enough. "Can't wait to see you again. Last night was incredible." My besieged. The world tilted. It wasn't a colleague. It wasn't an air freshener. It was real. The infidelity was real. The phone vibrated again, and Jamie was walking back in. I dropped it as if it were burning my hand, my face probably a mask of shock and horror. Jamie looked at me, then at the phone on the floor, a flicker of something unreadable in their eyes. "Everything okay, Alex?" they asked, their voice calm, too calm. He mumbled something about being clumsy, my voice barely a whisper. But inside, a storm was raging. The illusion had shattered. The perfect picture was in a million pieces at my feet. I couldn't sleep that night. The words, "Last night was incredible," echoed in my mind, a cruel mantra. The next morning, I knew I couldn't pretend any longer. The truth, as painful as it was, had to be confronted. I waited until Jamie was home from work, the air thick with unspoken tension. My hands were clammy, my heart a drum against my ribs. "Jamie," I began, my voice surprisingly steady, "we need to talk. And I need you to be honest with me. Completely honest." Jamie's face went pale. They knew. The casual indifference they had perfected over the past few weeks crumbled, replaced by a look of apprehension, then resignation. "Il est out my observation, the late night, the secretive phone, the unfamiliar sang, the message." Each word was a hammer blow, dismantling the carefully constructed facade of our life together. Jamie listened, their gaze fixed on the floor, their silence a deafening admission of guilt. The house of cards we had built, brick by brick, was collapsing around us. Then came the confession. Not a torrent of remorse, but a slow, agonizing drip of details. Jamie admitted to an affair, not a one-time mistake, but an ongoing relationship. Each word was 1,000 cuts, slicing through my heart, leaving me bleeding and raw. They spoke of loneliness, of feeling misunderstood, of a connection they found elsewhere. I listened, numb, my mind struggling to process the enormity of the betrayal. The person I loved, the person I trusted implicitly, had systematically deceived me, built a parallel life behind my back. I asked the questions I knew would hurt. Who is it? How long? Where? Each answer was a fresh wound, deepening the chasm between us. The details were mundane, yet devastating. A colleague. Months. After-work drinks, then dinners, then more. The places we had once talked about visiting together, now tainted by their secret rendezvous. The world, once vibrant and full of promise, had turned grey, devoid of color. I felt a physical ache, a hollowness in my chest where my heart used to be. The immediate aftermath was a blur of numbness and rage.
I remember screaming, my voice raw and hoarse, the sound alien even to my own ear.
I threw things not at Jamie, but at the walls, at the furniture, at anything that could absorb the force of my unleashed fury. Jamie stood there, silent, accepting my outburst, which only fueled my anger further. Their passivity was a fresh insult, a sign of their detachment, their lack of genuine remorse. Then came the numbness. A cold, heavy blanket that descended upon me, muffling the screams, dulling the pain. I felt nothing.
Absolutely nothing.
It was a defense mechanism, my mind shutting down to protect itself from the overwhelming agony. I walked away, leaving Jamie standing in the wreckage of our living room, and went to our bedroom. I packed a small bag, my movements robotic, my mind blank. I needed to escape. I needed to breathe. I needed to be anywhere but there. I drove aimlessly, the city lights blurring through my tear-filled eyes. The car, once a symbol of freedom, now felt like a cage, trapping me with my shattered thoughts.
I called my best friend, Sarah, my voice trembling, barely coherent. It's over, Sarah. It's all over.
Her gasp of shock was the only thing that pierced through my numbness. I ended up at her apartment, collapsing into her arms, the dam finally breaking. The tears flowed, hot and relentless, a torrent of grief, anger, and profound disappointment. Sarah held me, stroking my hair, whispering words of comfort that I couldn't quite hear. I felt like a shattered soul, my essence fragmented into a million pieces. The person I was, the life I had built, had been a lie, a carefully constructed illusion that had crumbled in an instant. The future, once so clear and bright, was now a terrifying void. I had no idea where to go, what to do, or how to pick up the pieces of my broken life. The journey of healing, though I didn't know it then, had just begun, and it would be the hardest, most transformative journey of my life. The morning after the confession dawned gray and bleak, mirroring the landscape of my soul. I woke up on Sarah's couch, the unfamiliar surroundings a stark reminder of my new reality. The numbness from the night before had receded, replaced by a throbbing ache in my chest, a physical manifestation of my broken heart. Every breath felt heavy, every thought a struggle. The silence in Sarah's apartment was deafening, amplifying the chaotic whispers in my mind. How could this have happened? How could I have been so blind? So foolish? The questions swirled, relentless and unanswered. Sarah, ever the angel, brought me a cup of tea, her eyes filled with concern. I tried to force a smile, but my lips felt stiff, unresponsive. The simplest tasks, like getting dressed or brushing my teeth, felt monumental, requiring an effort I didn't possess.
I was a ghost, moving through the motion, disconnected from my own body, my own life.
The world outside continued its relentless pace, oblivious to the earthquake that had just shattered my existence. And I felt utterly, completely alone. For the first few days, I retreated into myself, a self-imposed exile from the world. I couldn't bear to talk to anyone, to explain, to relive the pain. Sarah was incredibly patient, allowing me the space I needed, but her presence was a constant, comforting anchor. I spent hours staring blankly at the wall, replaying every conversation, every interaction, searching for clues I had missed, red flags I had ignored. The betrayal felt like a physical weight, pressing down on me, suffocating me. I felt a profound sense of shame, as if Jamie's actions were somehow a reflection of my own inadequacy. My phone, once a lifeline, became a source of dread. I ignored calls, deleted messages without reading them. The thought of facing anyone, of having to explain the wreckage of my life, was unbearable. I was ashamed, embarrassed, and utterly devastated. The silence, once a comfort, became a prison, trapping me in my own misery. I knew I couldn't stay like this forever, but the thought of re-engaging with the world, of pretending to be okay, felt like an insurmountable task. I was lost in a labyrinth of grief, with no map and no clear path out. Sarah, with her gentle persistence, eventually coaxed me out of my self-imposed isolation. "Alex," she said, her voice firm but kind. "You can't do this alone. You need to talk to someone." Reluctantly, I agreed to see a therapist. The first session was excruciating. I sat there, a bundle of raw nerves, struggling to articulate the chaos in my mind. The words felt inadequate, clumsy, unable to convey the depth of my pain. But the therapist, Dr. Evans, was patient, her presence calm and reassuring. She listened without judgment, allowing me to unravel my story at my own pace. Talking about it, even to a stranger, was a small step towards healing. It was like lancing a wound, painful but necessary. I started to understand that my feelings were valid, that my pain was real, and that I wasn't alone in experiencing such profound betrayal. Dr. Evans helped me to see that Jamie's actions were a reflection of their own issues, not a commentary on my worth. It was a slow, arduous process, but with each session, a tiny sliver of light began to pierce through the darkness. I was still broken, but I was no longer shattered. The initial numbness gave way to a fierce, consuming anger. Anger at Jamie for their betrayal, anger at myself for being so blind, anger at the universe for dealing me such a cruel blow. I raged internally, replaying scenarios in my mind, imagining confrontations, demanding answers. The anger was a powerful, almost intoxicating force, giving me a temporary sense of control in a world that felt utterly out of control. But it was also exhausting, leaving me drained and hollow. Interspersed with the anger were moments of desperate bargaining. What if I had done something differently? What if I had been more attentive, more understanding, more something? I tortured myself with hypothetical scenarios, trying to find a way to undo the past, to rewind time to a point before the betrayal. I even considered reaching out to Jamie, to plead, to beg, to try and salvage what was left of our relationship. But then the anger would resurface, a cold reminder of the depth of their deception, and the bargaining would cease, replaced by a renewed sense of resolve. This emotional rollercoaster was relentless, leaving me dizzy and disoriented. The emotional turmoil took a heavy toll on my physical well-being. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford. My mind raced, replaying conversations, dissecting every detail, unable to find peace. I would lie awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, the silence of the night amplifying my anxieties. When I did manage to drift off, my dreams were haunted by images of Jamie and the other person, their laughter echoing in my ears, their touch of phantom pain on my skin. I would wake up in a cold sweat, my heart pounding, the nightmare bleeding into reality. Food lost its appeal. Every bite felt like a chore, my stomach churning with nausea. I lost weight, my clothes hanging loosely on my frame, a visible testament to my inner turmoil. My friends and family, seeing my deteriorating state, tried to encourage me to eat, to rest, to take care of myself. But their words felt distant, muffled by the fog of my despair. I was a hollow shell, my body a mere vessel for my aching soul. The physical pain was a constant companion, a stark reminder of the emotional wounds that refused to heal. Jamie, after a few weeks, started reaching out. Apologies, expressions of regret, promises of change. They wanted to talk, to explain, to try and fix things. A part of me, the part that still clung to the memories of our shared past, yearned for reconciliation. The thought of going back to the familiar, to the comfort of what once was incredibly tempting. It was a glimmer of hope in the overwhelming darkness, a lifeline I desperately wanted to grasp. I met Jamie for coffee, my heart a chaotic drum solo in my chest. They looked tired, remorseful, and for a fleeting moment, I saw the person I had fallen in love with. They spoke of their mistakes, their regrets, their desire to make amends. But as I listened, a cold clarity began to settle in. The words felt hollow, rehearsed. The remorse seemed superficial, lacking the depth of true understanding. It wasn't about me, it was about them, about their guilt, about their desire to alleviate their own discomfort. The glimmer of hope flickered and died, replaced by a renewed sense of disappointment. I knew with a painful certainty that going back was not an option. The trust was shattered beyond repair. Rejecting reconciliation was a painful but necessary step. It was a declaration of self-worth, a refusal to settle for anything less than genuine respect and honesty. It was also incredibly liberating. With that decision, a new path began to emerge, faint at first, but slowly gaining clarity. I started focusing on myself, on my healing, on rediscovering the person I was before the betrayal. I reconnected with old hobbies, spent more time with supportive friends, and immersed myself in my work. Each small victory, each moment of laughter, each step forward, was a testament to my resilience. The journey was far from over. The pain still resurfaced, sometimes unexpectedly, like a phantom limb. But now, I had tools to cope, a support system to lean on, and a growing sense of self-awareness. I was learning to forgive, not Jamie, but myself. For being naive, for trusting too much, for allowing myself to be vulnerable. Forgiveness, I realized, was not about condoning their actions, but about releasing myself from the burden of anger and resentment. It was a slow, arduous process, but with each passing day, the labyrinth of grief became a little less daunting, and the path forward a little brighter. Months had passed since the separation. I was slowly rebuilding my life, piece by painful piece. The raw edges of the wound had begun to scab over, leaving a dull ache rather than a searing pain. I was focusing on my career, on my friendships, on rediscovering who I was outside of the shattered relationship. Then, a strange package arrived. It was a plain brown envelope, no return address, just my name scrawled across the front in unfamiliar handwriting. My heart gave a little lurch. A part of me, the still wounded part, braced for another blow from Jamie, another attempt at manipulation. But this felt different. This felt ominous. I opened it cautiously, my fingers trembling slightly. Inside, there was no letter, no note, just a small unmarked USB drive. My brow furrowed in confusion. Who would send me this? And why? A wave of apprehension washed over me. My first instinct was to throw it away, to sever any remaining ties to the painful past. But curiosity, a powerful and often dangerous force, got the better of me. I had to know. I had to understand. This was the beginning of the end, though I didn't know it then. The true unraveling was about to begin. I plugged the USB drive into my old laptop, the one Jamie had never used, a relic from my pre-marriage days. A single folder appeared on the screen, labeled simply, Truth. My heart pounded. I clicked it open. Inside there were dozens of files, documents, spreadsheets, and most chillingly audio recordings. My hands shook as I opened the first document. It was a series of financial transactions, large sums of money transferred from Jamie's personal account to an offshore account. My mind reeled. What was this? Was Jamie involved in something illegal? The infidelity, as painful as it was, suddenly seemed like a small piece of a much larger, darker puzzle. I opened another file, a spreadsheet detailing a complex web of shell corporations and dubious investments. The names were unfamiliar, the numbers staggering. This wasn't just about a personal betrayal, this was about something far more sinister. The audio recordings were next. My stomach clenched as I clicked on the first one. Jamie's voice, clear and unmistakable, but not talking to the other person. They were talking to someone else, someone I didn't recognize, discussing deals, numbers, and a sense of urgency. A cold dread settled in my bones. The infidelity was a smokescreen. A distraction. The real betrayal was yet to be revealed. I listened to more recordings, each one peeling back another layer of the elaborate deception. Jamie's voice, sometimes agitated, sometimes calculating, discussing illicit dealings, manipulating figures, and orchestrating shady business ventures. But then, a new voice emerged on one of the recordings. A voice that sent a shiver down my spine. It was familiar, yet utterly out of place. A voice I hadn't heard in years, a voice I had once trusted implicitly. It was Marcus Thorne, my former mentor. The man who had stolen my work, my dreams, my very identity. My mind raced, trying to connect the dots. Jamie and Marcus? What possible connection could they have? The pieces of the puzzle, once scattered and seemingly unrelated, began to click into place, forming a horrifying picture. The late nights, the secretive phone calls, the vague excuses, it wasn't just about another person. It was about something far more insidious. Jamie wasn't just cheating on me, they were involved in something with Marcus, something illegal, something that threatened to unravel everything. The next recording was the most devastating. It was a conversation between Jamie and Marcus, a chilling exchange that laid bare the true extent of their conspiracy. They weren't just business partners, they were co-conspirators. And the infidelity? It was a deliberate distraction. A carefully orchestrated plan to keep me occupied, to keep me from noticing the larger, more dangerous game they were playing. Jamie had been feeding Marcus information about my work, about my research, about Project Ether, even after I had left Thorn Innovations. They had been a mole, a spy in my own home, systematically undermining me, stealing my intellectual property, and using it for their own illicit gains. The betrayal was deeper, more profound than I could have ever imagined. It wasn't just my heart that had been broken, it was my trust, my professional integrity, my entire sense of reality. The infidelity was a smokescreen, a cruel diversion to mask a far more calculated and devastating act of treachery. I felt a cold, burning rage ignite within me, a fury unlike anything I had ever experienced. This wasn't just about a broken marriage, it was about a stolen future, a tarnished legacy, and a conspiracy that had been unfolding right under my nose. I confronted Jamie again, this time armed with irrefutable evidence. The USB drive, the recordings, the spreadsheets, all laid bare on the table between us. Jamie's face, once pale, now turned ashen. There was no denial this time, only a defeated silence. The confession that followed was different. It wasn't about a fleeting affair, it was about a calculated decision, a desperate attempt to secure their own financial future, even if it meant sacrificing our marriage, my career, and their own integrity. They spoke of pressure from Marcus, of threats, of being trapped in a web of their own making. The pain was different this time. Less about heartbreak, more about a profound sense of disillusionment. The person I loved, the person I had built a life with, was not just unfaithful, but a willing participant in a criminal enterprise that had directly targeted me. The emotional twist was agonizing. The infidelity, once the central pain, was now merely a symptom of a much larger, more sinister disease. I felt a deep sadness, not for the loss of the relationship, but for the loss of the person I thought Jamie was. The person I had loved was a stranger, a shadow, a figment of my own naive imagination. With the truth laid bare, I knew I couldn't fight this alone. I reached out to Dr. Reed, my former professor, the AI ethicist who had always believed in me. Her shock quickly turned to outrage as I explained the full extent of the conspiracy, providing her with the evidence from the USB drive. She immediately recognized the gravity of the situation, the ethical implications, and the potential for a major scandal that could shake the tech industry to its core. She vowed to help me, to use her influence and connections to expose Marcus and Jamie. Then, an even more unexpected ally emerged, Sophia, Marcus's former assistant. She had been the one who sent the anonymous package, her conscience finally getting the better of her. She had been meticulously collecting evidence of Marcus's illicit activities for months, documenting his financial fraud, his intellectual property theft, and his ruthless manipulation of those around him. She had seen the cracks in his empire, the rot beneath the polished facade, and she was determined to bring him down. Our combined evidence was a formidable weapon, a truth bomb waiting to explode. The plan began to take shape. It wasn't about revenge, it was about justice. It was about reclaiming my narrative, my work, my integrity. Dr. Reed would use her academic platform to expose the ethical breaches and intellectual property theft. Sophia would provide the irrefutable financial evidence, the paper trail of Marcus's crimes. And I would tell my story. The story of betrayal, of resilience, and of the unforeseen truth that had set me free. It would be a public reckoning, a moment of truth that would redefine not just my life, but the future of ethical AI. The emotional twist was complete. The infidelity, once a source of unbearable pain, had become the catalyst for a much larger revelation, a deeper understanding of the complexities of human nature, and the insidious nature of greed and ambition. My journey of healing had transformed into a quest for justice, a fight for what was right. And for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of purpose, a quiet strength that had emerged from the ashes of my shattered dreams. The stage was set. The truth was about to be unleashed. The Global Tech Summit. The very same stage where Marcus Thorne had unveiled Ethos, claiming my work as his own. The irony was not lost on me as I stood backstage, my heart pounding, not with fear, but with a quiet, fierce determination. This wasn't just a presentation, it was a reckoning. The culmination of months of meticulous planning, of gathering evidence, of steeling myself for the inevitable confrontation. Dr. Reed was by my side, her presence a calming anchor. Sophia was in the audience, a silent, unwavering ally. The air crackled with anticipation. The world was about to hear my truth. I walked onto the stage, the spotlights blinding, the roar of the crowd a distant hum. I began my presentation, not with accusations, but with a vision. I spoke of Veritas AI, our groundbreaking work in ethical AI development, our commitment to transparency, accountability, and human-centric design. I presented our algorithms, our frameworks, our real-world applications, all meticulously documented and open source. The audience, initially captivated by the technology, soon became intrigued by the underlying philosophy, the stark contrast to the industry's prevailing culture of unchecked ambition. As I spoke, I subtly wove in anecdotes, veiled references to the importance of intellectual property, the dangers of unchecked power, and the ethical responsibilities of innovators. I didn't name names, not yet. But the seeds of doubt were planted. I saw a few journalists in the front row, their pens scribbling furiously, their eyes darting between me and the screens displaying our ethical framework. The whispers began, a low murmur rippling through the audience. They were starting to connect the dots, to question the narrative they had been fed by Thorn Innovations. Then came the Q&A session. I braced myself. I knew the question was coming. A journalist, sharp-eyed and relentless, raised her hand. "Ms. Alex," she began, her voice clear and strong, "your work on Veritas AI seems remarkably similar to the foundational principles of Ethos, which was developed by Marcus Thorne. Can you comment on the similarities, and perhaps, the origins of your initial research?" The room fell silent. All eyes were on me. This was it. The moment of truth. I took a deep breath. "Thank you for that question," I began, my voice steady, unwavering. "It's a question I've been waiting to answer for a very long time." And then, I unleashed the truth. I spoke of my partnership with Marcus, of our shared vision for Ether, of his betrayal, and of the systematic theft of my intellectual property. I presented the evidence, the original research documents, the early code commits, the emails, the audio recordings from a USB drive. Each piece of evidence was projected onto the massive screens, undeniable, irrefutable. The gasps from the audience were audible. The murmurs turned into a roar. The truth, raw and devastating, was finally out. The summit erupted into chaos. Journalists scrambled, cameras flashed, and the news spread like wildfire. Within minutes, the story was trending globally. Marcus Thorne, once hailed as a visionary, was now exposed as a fraud, a thief, a charlatan. The evidence was overwhelming, meticulously gathered by Sophia, meticulously presented by me. The world watched as his empire began to crumble, brick by painful brick. Lawsuits were filed, investigations launched, and his carefully constructed facade shattered into a million pieces. Jamie, implicated in the conspiracy, also faced legal repercussions, their desperate choices laid bare for the world to see. In the aftermath, there was a sense of profound relief, a catharsis that washed over me. Justice had been served. My name, my work, my integrity, all had been reclaimed. Veritas AI flourished, becoming a beacon of ethical innovation, attracting the brightest minds and the most principled investors. My journey, once defined by betrayal and heartbreak, had transformed into a story of resilience, of fighting for truth, and of ultimately finding redemption not in revenge, but in rebuilding, in creating something better. I learned that true strength isn't about avoiding pain, but about navigating it, transforming it, and emerging stronger on the other side. The emotional twist, the revelation of the deeper conspiracy, had been a painful gift. It had forced me to confront not just Jamie's infidelity, but the insidious nature of ambition and the importance of standing firm in my own truth. My story, once a private agony, became a public testament to the power of integrity, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, truth will always find a way to shine. Life after the storm settled into a different kind of peace. It wasn't the naive, blissful peace of my pre-betrayal life, but a deeper, more grounded tranquility born from resilience and self-discovery. The media frenzy eventually subsided, the lawsuits slowly wound their way through the courts, and the public moved on to the next scandal. But for me, the echoes of that period lingered, not as a source of pain, but as a constant reminder of how far I had come. My home, once filled with the ghost of a broken marriage, now felt like a sanctuary, a space I had reclaimed and filled with my own energy. The scars of betrayal remained, not as open wounds, but as faded marks on my soul. I learned that healing isn't about forgetting, but about integrating the pain into your story, allowing it to shape you without defining you. There were still moments, unexpected triggers, a song, a scent, a familiar street, that would bring a pang of sadness or a flicker of anger. But these moments were fleeting, quickly replaced by a sense of gratitude for the strength I had discovered, for the lessons I had learned. I understood that trust, once broken, is incredibly difficult to rebuild, and that some relationships, no matter how deeply cherished, are simply not meant to survive certain betrayals. Forgiveness, I discovered, was not a single event, but a continuous process. I didn't forgive Jamie for their actions, not in the sense of condoning them. But I learned to forgive myself for my own naivety, for the blind trust one had placed in someone who proved unworthy. And I learned to release the anger, the resentment, the bitterness that had once consumed me. It was a personal journey, a decision to free myself from the emotional chains that bound me to the past. It wasn't for them, it was for me. And with each release, I felt lighter, freer, more at peace. The most profound lesson I learned was the unwavering power of truth. Even when it's painful, even when it shatters your world, truth ultimately sets you free. It allows you to rebuild on a foundation of authenticity, to forge connections based on genuine trust, and to live a life aligned with your values. I also learned the invaluable importance of self-worth. My worth was not, and never had been, defined by Jamie's actions or by the success of a relationship. My worth was inherent, an unshakable truth that resided within me, waiting to be rediscovered. My story, once a private agony, became a testament to resilience, a beacon of hope for others who might be navigating similar betrayals. I shared my experiences, not to sensationalize, but to empower, to remind people that even in the darkest of times, there is always a path towards healing, towards justice, and towards a profound rebirth of self. The journey was arduous, but the destination, a life lived with integrity, purpose, and an unshakable sense of self-worth, was worth every single step. Veritas AI, born from the ashes of betrayal, continued to thrive. It became more than just a company, it became a movement. We attracted the brightest minds in ethical AI, individuals who shared our commitment to transparency, accountability, and human-centric design. Our work wasn't just about technological advancement, it was about building a better future, one where AI served humanity, not exploited it. We collaborated with universities, governments, and nonprofits, advocating for responsible AI development and pushing for stricter regulations against intellectual property theft and corporate malfeasance. I found a new purpose in mentorship and advocacy. I spoke at conferences, not just about Veritas AI, but about my personal journey, about the importance of integrity in the tech industry, and about empowering individuals to stand up for themselves. I mentored young innovators, sharing my experiences, guiding them through the pitfalls of a competitive and sometimes ruthless industry. I became an advocate for victims of intellectual property theft, using my platform to raise awareness and push for stronger legal protections. It was my way of paying it forward, of transforming my pain into purpose. My personal life also found a new rhythm. I embraced solitude, finding peace in my own company, in pursuing my passions, in nurturing the relationships that truly mattered. I redefined happiness, realizing it wasn't about external validation or societal expectations, but about inner peace, authenticity, and genuine connection. I traveled, explored new cultures, and discovered new facets of myself. The world, once a source of pain, became a canvas for new experiences, new adventures.
And what about love?
The question lingered, sometimes whispered by well-meaning friends, sometimes a quiet thought in my own mind. I wasn't actively searching, but I was open. Open to the possibility of a new connection, one built on a foundation of honesty, respect, and shared values. I knew that true love wasn't about perfection, but about embracing imperfections, about navigating challenges with integrity, and about a mutual commitment to growth. My heart, once shattered, had healed, leaving behind a stronger, more resilient version of myself, ready for whatever the future held. My story was far from over, it was just beginning a new, more authentic chapter. While my narrative has focused on my experience, it's crucial to acknowledge that every story has multiple sides. Jamie's involvement in Marcus Thorne's illicit activities, and the subsequent infidelity, wasn't a simple act of malice. It was a complex web of desperation, manipulation, and a profound sense of inadequacy. I never truly understood the depth of Jamie's struggles until much later, after the dust had settled and the legal proceedings had begun to unfold. This isn't to excuse their actions, but to offer a more nuanced understanding of the circumstances that led to such a devastating betrayal. Jamie, I learned, had been under immense pressure from Marcus Thorne for years. Marcus, a master manipulator, had identified Jamie's vulnerabilities, a deep-seated insecurity about their own professional achievements, a fear of failure, and a desperate desire for recognition. He had dangled promises of wealth, power, and a fast track to success, slowly drawing Jamie into his web of illicit dealings. Jamie, blinded by ambition and a desire to prove their worth, had fallen into the trap, believing they could control the situation, that they could extract themselves when the time was right. But Marcus's grip was far stronger than Jamie had anticipated. The infidelity, I discovered, was not born out of love or genuine affection for the other person. It was a desperate act, a calculated diversion orchestrated by Marcus. He had instructed Jamie to engage in an affair, knowing it would consume my attention, distract me from Jamie's increasingly suspicious activities, and create a smokescreen for the larger intellectual property theft. Jamie, trapped and terrified, had complied, believing it was the only way to protect themselves and, ironically, to protect me from the dangerous world they had stumbled into. It was a twisted logic, born from fear and desperation, but it explained the coldness, the detachment, the lack of genuine remorse I had observed during our initial confrontation. In the end, Jamie faced the full consequences of their actions. Legal repercussions, public condemnation, and the complete destruction of their reputation. The wealth and power Marcus had promised evaporated, leaving Jamie with nothing but regret and the bitter taste of betrayal. I heard through mutual acquaintances that Jamie was struggling, grappling with the weight of their choices, the loss of everything they once held dear. While I felt no sympathy for their actions, I felt a profound sadness for the person Jamie had become, for the dreams they had sacrificed, and for the heavy price they had paid for their ambition. The emotional twist was complete. The infidelity was not the core of the betrayal, but a tragic symptom of a much larger, more complex human failing. My story, and the subsequent exposure of Marcus Thorne's illicit activities, had a ripple effect far beyond my personal life. It ignited a much-needed conversation within the tech industry about ethics, intellectual property, and corporate accountability. What began as a personal tragedy transformed into a catalyst for significant change, forcing a re-evaluation of practices that had long been overlooked or deliberately ignored. The truth, once unleashed, had a power that transcended individual narratives. Veritas AI, with its unwavering commitment to ethical principles, became a leading voice in the movement for responsible AI development. Our open-source frameworks and transparent methodologies set a new standard for the industry. More companies began to adopt ethical guidelines, recognizing that long-term success was not just about innovation, but about trust and integrity. Universities incorporated ethical AI into their curricula, and governments started exploring new regulations to protect intellectual property and prevent corporate malfeasance. It was a slow, arduous process, but the tide was turning. I became a vocal advocate for stronger protections for innovators, particularly those who, like me, had their work stolen or exploited. I worked with legal experts and policymakers to draft new legislation, to close loopholes, and to ensure that intellectual property rights were vigorously defended. My personal experience fueled my passion, giving me a unique perspective and a powerful voice. The goal was to create a safer, more equitable environment for all innovators, to prevent others from enduring the same pain and injustice I had faced. The legacy of my story, and the work of Veritas AI, was not just about exposing a fraud, it was about building a future where integrity was paramount. It was about reminding the world that technology, while powerful, must always be guided by ethical principles. It was about proving that one person, armed with truth and resilience, could stand up against a seemingly insurmountable force and emerge victorious. My journey had been painful, but it had also been profoundly meaningful, leaving a lasting impact on an industry that desperately needed a moral compass. The truth, once revealed, had the power to heal, to transform, and to inspire a new era of responsible innovation. Even after the public reckoning and the industry shifts, my personal journey of growth continued. Healing isn't a destination, it's an ongoing process, a continuous unfolding. There were still days when the shadows of the past would loom, moments of quiet reflection where the pain would resurface. But these moments were no longer overwhelming. They were reminders, gentle nudges to acknowledge how far I had come, how much I had learned, and how resilient the human spirit truly is. I embraced the idea that I was a work in progress, constantly evolving, constantly learning. The betrayal had profoundly impacted my ability to trust, especially in romantic relationships. It took time, patience, and a willingness to be vulnerable again. I learned to distinguish between healthy caution and debilitating fear. I sought out connections based on genuine respect, open communication, and shared values. I understood that true intimacy required vulnerability, a willingness to open my heart even after it had been broken. It was a slow, deliberate process, but with each step, I felt my capacity for love and connection expanding, not shrinking. I also learned the profound importance of self-compassion. For years, I had been hard on myself, blaming myself for Jamie's actions, questioning my own judgment. But through therapy and self-reflection, I began to cultivate a sense of kindness and understanding towards myself. I realized that I was a victim of deception, not a perpetrator. Nurturing my soul, practicing self-care, and allowing myself to be imperfect became essential parts of my daily life. It was a radical act of self-love, a way to heal the deepest wounds. My life, once defined by the betrayal, was now defined by purpose. The work at Veritas AI, the advocacy for ethical innovation, the mentorship of young minds, all of it filled me with a profound sense of meaning. I was no longer just surviving, I was thriving. I was building a legacy, not of revenge, but of integrity, of truth, and of a commitment to making the world a better place. The journey had been arduous, but it had led me to a place of strength, wisdom, and an unshakable belief in the power of my own story. And that, I realized, was the greatest victory of all. As I reflect on my journey, the echoes of the past still resonate. The pain of betrayal, the shock of the unforeseen twist, the arduous path to healing, all of it is etched into the fabric of my being. But these echoes are no longer haunting. They are reminders, testaments to the resilience of the human spirit, to the transformative power of truth, and to the profound lessons learned in the crucible of adversity. My story is not unique. Countless individuals have faced similar betrayals, similar heartbreaks. But it is my hope that by sharing my experience, I can offer a glimmer of hope, a roadmap for navigating the darkest of times. The core message of my story, I believe, transcends the specifics of infidelity and corporate espionage. It is a universal message about the importance of integrity, both in our personal lives and in our professional endeavors. It is about the courage to confront uncomfortable truths, to stand up for what is right, even when the odds seem insurmountable. It is about the insidious nature of unchecked ambition and the devastating consequences of prioritizing personal gain over ethical principles. And it is about the enduring power of honesty, even when it comes at a great personal cost. To anyone listening, to anyone who has experienced betrayal, I urge you to find your own truth. It may be painful, it may be messy, but it is the only path to genuine healing and lasting peace. Don't let someone else's actions define your worth. Don't let their lies dictate your future. Reclaim your narrative. Reclaim your power. And remember that even in the darkest of moments, there is a spark of resilience within you, waiting to be ignited. Seek support, trust your instincts, and never, ever give up on yourself. My story, like all stories, is still being written. The future is unwritten, filled with possibilities, with new challenges, and with new joys. I carry the lessons of the past with me, not as burdens, but as wisdom. I am stronger, wiser, and more compassionate than I ever thought possible. And I am filled with a profound sense of gratitude for the journey, for the pain that led to growth, and for the truth that ultimately set me free. Thank you for listening. May your own journey be filled with truth, resilience, and the unwavering power of your own story.